it up, it's your new groove, yeah. Riding waves in the digital blue, yeah. CDO Times got that insight, yeah. For the execs in the tech light, yeah. Bridging gaps with every tune, play it. Sync your mind to the tech boom, slay it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Bytes of Brilliance, your go-to podcast, I hope, for insights in digital transformation, AI strategy, and data management. I'm your host, Carsten Kraus, founder of the CDO Times. And today we have a special guest, Scott Taylor, widely known as the Data Whisperer. Scott is the principal consultant at Meta Consulting, and also he wrote a book called Telling Your Data Story. So it's kind of a giveaway. Today it's going to be all about data stories, right? So he's worked with some of the world's most iconic data brands and has spent decades helping organizations unlock the strategic value of their data. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carsten. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Scott, you built an incredible career at the intersection of data management and storytelling, which is obviously very important. Could you start by sharing a bit about your journey? What led you to become the Data Whisperer?
I've been in the data space since pre-2K, so I go back almost 30 years. And worked with every kind of enterprise at every level of maturity in every category all over the earth. So there's a little limited scope. But I came from the supplier side. So worked for Nielsen, Dun & Bradstreet, as you mentioned, these iconic data brands. And it gave me a unique experience to tap into the angst, the passion, the fear, the dreams of data practitioners across this wide spectrum of categories. And began to recognize, okay, they have this almost dual personality. When I talked to them, they were super passionate about the work that they knew data management could do for their organization. At the same time, they were super frustrated because nobody would listen to them. Because they couldn't articulate it in a way that the business would understand it or care about it. And not a big secret here. The data management side of the space is not the cool, hot, sexy, sparkly side, right? It's kind of dull and boring and back office and clerical, reference data. Nothing sounds more dull than that, even though and I know it's critical to everything. And so I really found this ability to bring a voice to that part of the community. At first, as part of my literal job to being in sales and marketing and strategy to help build the business that I was representing. And then in the last 4 or 5 years or so, as a full-time content creator in the data management space, doing videos, events, podcasts, webinars, cartoons, puppet shows, whatever it takes to break through the noise around and get the attention of folks about this really vital part of the data journey that everybody takes, which is where data starts, starting off the right way before you go too far on where data ends up in analytics and BI and AI and so on.
Yeah. Personally, I have to say, I think data is sexy. So just to get that out of the room. So, I think it's super fun, and the technologies behind it, I can geek off about that for hours, but, we're not necessarily focusing on that today, but
no question, people think it's sexy. But my experience has found like sort of the data management side versus, AI and business intelligence.
Right.
It's never really the one that like, oh, hooray, we're going to talk about data quality today or data hygiene or, you want to clear the room of stakeholders, tell them you're going to embark on a data hygiene program. They're going to go right to the door.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, pretty much everybody wants to bypass all the steps and immediately get to the shiny dashboard, or nowadays to the ChatGPT prompt that solves world peace and whatnot, right?
And that's the part that the business interacts with, the data,
exactly.
The dashboard, the end result. Yeah. So
right.
They don't. When you start to explain this kind of stuff to the business side, most of them have no clue that even goes on, much less important and should have a focus and should get engagement and extra funding. And
Yeah.
other things.
So storytelling is obviously at the heart of your work, your focus, you're the data whisperer. Why is it so important in data management? And how can organizations embrace it and make their data more impactful?
You mentioned my book, Telling Your Data Story, Data Storytelling for Data Management. It says right on there, 99% buzzword free. I didn't want to overpromise. But data storytelling, when that came out, I went, okay, that sounds like a cool idea. But the more I learned about it, it was really analytic storytelling. It was a way to take data and insight and metrics and put them in some form of business context to drive action. Super important. But my feeling also was like, as usual, the thing people are talking about that's data isn't really about the data management. It's about the analytics side. So I felt there was a room in the space for a second kind of data storytelling, one about the data rather than with the data, one that reinforced the strategic value of proper data management, one that could help get funding and engagement and support and the money we all need to do the data work we do. And there was a critical need based on my decades of experience to formalize this idea of putting a business accessible narrative together to get that kind of engagement. And nobody was helping people do that other than just kind of anecdotally. So I put a line in the sand, just the book really helped kind of set the stage around that and have me, proclaim without too much pushback. There's two kinds of data storytelling out there. One about analytics, stories with data, but also one about data management, stories about the data. You should learn both. But frankly, you can't tell stories with data unless you've got good data, which means you need to tell stories about why you need to manage it. And so that seemed like there's, a natural place in the space to formalize that approach.
Right. Yeah, I think we that kind of leads into my next question, and it also, I think we discussed it briefly, that you gotta have the foundations in place. I've experienced scenarios where you couldn't necessarily trust the data. You might have the end product in mind, but all the other stuff was kind of glued together with some tape and whatnot, right? So it wasn't pretty. And so how do you set up the right foundation for this transformation based on data and get the foundation right?
My role in that is putting the story and positioning and pitch together.
Okay.
I don't do anything technical. I talk about why it's important rather than how to get it done. You got to get it done. I'm not suggesting if they say yes, you have to know how to do it.
Right.
But there's not as much focus on why, and CDOs and CDAOs and CDAIOU and sometimes YOs, they like to talk about how they're going to implement the latest analytics graph hub fabric mesh. And I never met a CEO or a CFO who cares about how you're going to do that stuff.
Right.
They understand why it's important. So focusing on that why is critical.
Right.
And I boil my whole data philosophy down literally to 3 words. When you want to communicate clearly, sometimes a good exercise is to see the fewest number of words you can use. So my philosophy is truth before meaning. You mentioned trusting the data. Trust and truth go hand in hand there. You got to determine the truth in your data before you derive meaning out of it, is the way I like to share that notion with folks, so they get an understanding of, yes, there's 2 parts. Yes, there's 2 things we have to do. And it's not chicken or egg here. It's egg and omelet. You don't have the truth in your data. You're not going to derive the meaning that you intend to get out of it. And that truth comes from that solid foundation. People look for analogies all the time, and it's sitting right in front of us, hidden in plain sight. Why do you think they call it a foundation, right? They don't call it the roof. They don't call it the walls. They don't call it the curtains up in the den. That's like the foundation. If you want to build a house, you got to have a foundation.
Right.
And it's a great imagery to use because it's so solid. And that's where, a lot of this talk comes in. And being able to, we talk about master data, reference data, MDM, RDM, PIM, RIM, DAM, all those, techniques. but you got to be able to share it in a way that people don't get too involved in.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, how you get it done. It's
Right.
like, why is this important?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, when I talk, so I'm totally on board with, creating the vision, where's the value in the data, and where that's even more important is for you to work with the CDOs and CAOs and CIOs, is that unfortunately you can't switch it on tomorrow, right? And so often it's a exercise you can do it in an agile fashion. You should do it in an agile fashion. But from my experience, there's been some of these projects can, if they're really fixing a lot of things that have happened with maybe even multiple acquisitions that a company has done, multiple data sources, this could be like a year-long project till you're like an investment into the future, believing you need to do it, and having Scott tell us this is why you need to do it, and then it's a little bit of a roadmap, hopefully some quick wins sprinkled in there, but
Right.
that's the name of the game in intelligence. There's a lot of data wrangling, and ultimately seeing the dashboard is the last 10-20% of the work, or there's some new options now with generative AI coming down the way, but the foundations are still there. But I love what you do to like show the value. Maybe that's a good leeway into what you're thinking from a AI perspective, right? I've just recently worked with one of my clients, and it happened to be the time to roll out generative AI pilots, and we proved them out, and then we're like, oh, our data products are not ready, and the integration's not ready, and we can't go live, and we need to think about ethical use of the data and how to protect our data, if it's internal or external. In your opinion, how does generative AI technology impact data management, and also maybe help or hinder storytelling?
I hope it helps at least the story about why it's important. And some of the things you mentioned, that's a classic sequence. Today, just with Gen AI, you can just spread bad stuff faster and at scale better than you ever could before, right? You can have bigger disasters than you ever imagined. But you go back, this was the same conversation people had a couple of years ago when they jumped in, when COVID happened, everybody leapt into e-commerce. Suddenly, a lot of folks, they were talking about how this is accelerating digital transformation, 20 years of digital transformation in 18 months and all this other stuff. But they hit this roadblock because this, as an example, in e-commerce, they realized their product data wasn't any good and they didn't have it structured well enough. They had internal data, but they couldn't expose it to their end users in any way. So, and the analysts had record MDM inquiries during that time. And before that, as you mentioned, data wrangling, came up with, really started making the headlines when data science came out, and then they were complaining about how they spent 80% of their time munging and wrangling data, and probably the other 20% complaining about munging and wrangling data. And you go back further to enterprise systems being implemented at the turn of the previous century in a lot of cases. And that's where terminology like data silos, and we got to harmonize our legacy data, and domain masters. And you go even back further, let's go all the way back like 7,000 years to the dawn of accounting, before computers, before electricity, but there was still data. General ledger as a basic concept of accounting. You still had to have a chart of accounts. You still had that some form of structured listing of your relationships. Right. And so my punchline to all that, is Gen AI a new story? You go from Gen AI all the way back to Gen Ledger, and it's the same story. You got to determine the truth before you derive meaning. And it just, the cycles, and you've been in this space long enough to see a number of them. You just go, are we ever going to learn? Are we ever going to not get far ahead of our skis on the newest, greatest, coolest, hottest, sparkly thing before we realize, we got to do the hard work again? And it is hard work.
Right.
That's part of why I think I help people kind of get inspired and fired up about it and focused on the end game, because Gen AI and AI is going to help in data stewardship. It's going to help standardize stuff as long as it's set up right. But there's no, there's no Ozempic here for data management. It's not a magic pill or shot you can take that's suddenly going to make all that data fitter. You got to do the hard work.
Yeah, that's so true. It's heartening to hear it and frustrating at the same time. But
that's that dual schizophrenia we all deal with. Of just like, it's a roller coaster.
yeah, and the other part with generative AI is, unfortunately, it doesn't always learn on good data, right? So you have to actually think about, and companies are starting to realize this now, where they build their own. They see the value in their data assets and protect them, and determining of what you want to share with other companies and what insights can you gain by pulling external information in to make better decisions. But it's often the same.
It's the same. It's just the same. I don't know. It's just,
so.
it's just like, I feel like Chicken Little all the time. Like, the sky is going to fall if you just, don't you realize that, don't you?
That might be another topic for a new video for you, right?
Yes, the chicken. Yes, I just stumbled on that here.
So yeah, I think one of the things that obviously your with your expertise and your book and what you've helped other data leaders with is they're trying to exactly be business focused, speak the same language. At the same time, there are some pitfalls, right, that folks want to avoid. With other leaders that are trying to work through this right now, maybe they come more from a technology background. What are some common pitfalls that you've seen, and what are some lessons learned that you can share on how to avoid them?
Yeah, great question. And a lot of those pitfalls come, honestly, I think, because to be great at data and technology, you have to be good at the hard skills. You have to, right? The science side, the technology side are really based on hard skills that you have to be fluent in. So they don't necessarily spend as much time on the soft skill part of communication and, articulating things and kind of artistically how to position stuff, which is, I'm only soft skills. So I kind of over rotate on that part. So it's important to focus on that as you grow as a leader. And if you want to be a leader and you want to help, be more effective in your organization, you got to learn how to communicate. And I put a really simple framework together in my book. I call it the 3 V's of data storytelling, and it'd probably be the 3 V's of business engagement to a certain extent, on how to put this business accessible narrative together. Mine are, knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data, but mine are vocabulary, voice, and vision. And so vocabulary, get the words right. Don't use the technical stuff. Use it among your peers because you're implementing things, but don't expect and don't even try to teach the business side this vocabulary. Use the language of your business if you want to talk to the business.
Makes sense.
Get the voice right. What's the tone? How are you approaching this? Does your whole team know it? If you're a data leader, does your whole team understand the value they're bringing to the organization? Or are they just kind of pondering on it? Or are they just heads down into, stewardship and analytics and don't realize the importance of it? And as you're trying to present this, simple ththings like, have you practiced it before? Have you tried it? Have you tried it out on your team or your partner or your dog, or have you spoken in the mirror? Have you? I don't know how many data.
You can use ChatGPT for that.
Yeah, ChatGPT, but you still need to be able to say it, right? You still have to be able to present it and communicate it, and that takes some form of rehearsal. As drudgery as that might sound, and as nervous as it might make people, good. I'd rather you be nervous when you're practicing it than do it for the first time in front of your board and blow it. Okay, so there's not a sports team out there that doesn't practice, no matter how good they are, every day before every game. And I do a lot of public speaking. I tell people I have a fear of not public speaking, and I practice and rehearse and work things all the time. And then the final V is vision. Where's your company going? Everything you do in data has got to enable the strategic intentions of your enterprise. What is that direction, and why is data going to help you get there? And learning that from literally your leaders already. Your CEO wrote a vision letter in the latest annual report. Take a look at that. You'll not find anything about data management or data quality or data hygiene. That's not going to be in there. But they're going to talk about things that do have a direct connection to the data that you manage, like relationships and brands and doing things at scale. And if I had to summarize the intention of every enterprise I've ever worked with, it's to bring value to their relationships through their brands at scale. And doing that takes technology. Technology is hardware, software, data. If you own the data part, you got to have data management. Checkmate. That's the shortest version. But learn that and then speak to that. Your data strategy is your business strategy. I'm not the first one to say that, but hear what they say, listen to the goals and vision and aspirations of your own enterprise, and draw the connections between what you are doing and, frankly, what you need to do in data management and the ability for your company to achieve those goals. There is a direct line in there. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight. Sometimes, many people don't see it, but if you attune yourself and sharpen your focus around that, your CEO is talking about relationships. Meanwhile, in your enterprise, you've got 28 places you can do customer create. Your database is flooded with duplicates. You got no hierarchy. Your biggest category is called other. It's a mess down there. So how are you going to support those relationships if you don't have the data to support it?
Right. Yeah, while you were talking, I was also thinking about the class that I took recently at MIT, and they were using something similar that you mentioned, like it's called the Relate framework. And what was interesting about that was that you're really doing your due diligence before you're trying to understand your audience. You talk to people from the direct audience and maybe folks that know what to expect, and then training, getting feedback, having situational awareness about one communication might work really well in one part of the organization, but in the other part it's almost a different culture, right? And
exactly. Yeah. If you're talking to marketing, it's going to be a different conversation than legal.
Yeah. So we all need to learn that anyway, irrespective if you are a data leader or not. Storytelling is so important anywhere, really. Super important.
And you bring up an excellent point, knowing that audience, even within your own company. Can you tell that story to legal? Can you tell it to finance? Can you tell it to marketing? Can you tell it to sales in a way that they all care?
Right.
Because and the beauty of data, and part of why I love being in this space so much, is you can bring value to every one of those parts of the organization.
Yeah.
They may not see it yet, but there's this horizontal value that data brings that's unlike anything else in a company. And the problems are there. Yeah. And if you have great master data, you can use the same data everywhere to solve all those problems. So it's not about, it's about re-leveraging some assets you may have already curated.
Yeah. Yeah. What that also brings into mind for me is I often come into organizations as a chief architect and working with data professionals and data whisperers, right? We're all trying to identify what are these common themes that align with the corporate vision of where we want to go, and not necessarily want to go in like immediate terms, but also what's kind of a transformational agenda for maybe 3 years, 5 years out, and what are some things that we can do right now. And so being able to relate, speak the same language, understand your audience is so important, right? And
all soft skills, right? Yeah. All soft skills, but super. I don't know why they call them soft skills. They're pretty tough to do too, but it's just, that terminology is established. We can't change
hard skills.
Yeah.
All right. So I think so far enjoyed our conversation quite a bit. What I like to do in these podcasts is to do like a rapid fire round. It's like kind of like a speed dating type situation where
ready. Hit me with these.
Shoot off some questions and you just tell me what comes into mind. Are you ready?
I'm ready. We're ready.
Awesome. What's your favorite data related book besides your own, of course?
Oh man. Maybe I was ready for. How about mine in French? There we go. So 99% Saint Ma a la mode, which of course means no words with ice cream. This book, Stephen Few wrote this book called Big Data, Big Dupe. It's kind of, not quite as topical today, but I really loved his like attitude, just kind of poking through it. And it was a short little book, but his whole tone, I've never met him, but he just kind of like broke through the whole when big data was huge. And I guess ironically, now that I think of it, another great book is by Doug Laney, Infonomics, who the irony part is he came up with the 3 V's of big data originally, variety, velocity, and volume.
Yeah.
But it really gives you, it's just like the seminal book in data valuation. And even if you don't convince your CFO to put data as a hard asset on your balance sheet, it gives you some really good vocabulary.
Yeah.
Business-oriented vocabulary. And it gives you something where a lot of people are kind of struggling to and have nothing. So it's that one's probably more current and more practical to use. But Doug's become a good friend of mine, and it's been great.
Yeah, with big data, you have the new kid on the block is now a data lake house or metadata lake house. So
my feeling about lake house is your CEO thinks that's where your data goes on vacation.
Right.
So that term isn't going to fly with the C-suite. It's like, oh, you want to build a lake house? Huh? Okay, nice. Well, we built a lake. Now we want to put a house on it, and a boat, a data boat.
Maybe related to that, if there's any data myth, what would be like a data myth that you would like to debunk?
In the world, and it's not as prevalent now, but it's still percolating around there. It's this idea that, when you bifurcate the space between data and analytics, when people get up and say, data's worthless without the analytics. Data doesn't have any value until we we turn it into information and then knowledge and wisdom and, those kinds of things, sort of devaluing and kind of lowering the status of the raw core content, which again, that's the world that I lived in and love so much and realize how important it is. My feeling is like, have you ever heard a baker say, this flour's worthless until I turned it into bread? You got to respect the ingredients and to be the voice of that part of the community as well. The people who work on those kinds of things. And there were a lot of analytics leaders kind of touting that. I don't think it's as prevalent, but it still kind of peeks its head up. Why do we have to be competitive with each other within the same group almost? And, and again, the business side looks and goes, well, what's more valuable, data? And I don't care. Why you guys are bickering about this? You guys can't even figure it out. Just
I
get it done.
I think that makes a lot of sense from a storytelling perspective. As a baker or a cook, you want to have high quality ingredients.
You want to have great ingredients. Yeah. And then there's people like, I don't care about the data. I just care about the analytics. I just care about the AI. Following along the food analogy, that's like saying, I want a great meal, but I don't care about the ingredients. Who would ever say that? You can't say, like, it's not possible.
Right.
So just making sure that, we have an equal playing field, or that we understand everybody's role and all these parts come together to get where you want to go. And one isn't, more important than the other.
If you would want to describe the future of data in one word, what would it be?
I still think it's all about scale. I think that's the one word benefit statement of things like master reference, metadata, that whole subset, that whole structural part, that just really enables scale. And the flip side is you can't scale without it, right? You can't do something 1,000,000 times instead of 10 times unless you've got this structured data. And just look at all the aspirational companies that everybody talks about when they talk about, great things you can do with data, Airbnb and Uber and Amazon and Netflix. They have all this really well-governed, expertly stewarded, spectacular, structured data underneath to do the things they want to do. Otherwise, they just literally couldn't happen.
Right. That makes sense. If you could have dinner with any data leader, past or present, who would it be?
I think it would be fun. It's a fun question. I think it would be AC Nielsen. I think it would be Arthur Nielsen. I mean, having worked at the Nielsen company and just knowing to a great degree just what pioneers they were and he was, whether it's junior or senior, they worked together. They actually won a father and son tennis championship. I know a little bit of
Oh, wow.
Nielsen trivia, but just having the foresight and understanding, you hear about somebody who was really going from, clay to skyscrapers in a space where I'm a big fan, especially of syndicated data because of the intense work that has to go on to feed an entire marketplace with common stuff. It's really hard. And it's really admirable to get it done. And here was somebody who just kind of had that vision of whether it was tracking TV ratings or tracking products in store. That's the part. I came from the retail side of Nielsen. It was always fascinating and interesting to me. When I worked at Nielsen, I talked about how Nielsen was the world's largest counter of things. So, just basic stuff, right? They count people, they count products, they count viewers, they count ads, they count lots and lots of stuff. But that would probably be an interesting conversation to hear about how he just decided, how did he call on Procter and Gamble the first time? How'd they convince him, to get?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main business model, I've been working in the retail and CPG space for quite a bit now, and it's all about understanding what's happening in really happening in the store, right? What are customers doing, right? And that's such a valuable insight for your product strategy and promotional planning and all.
And I think those categories, CPG and FMCG, I think they've had the most data. I still believe they have the most data sources of any kind of company, of any kind of enterprise. Just and have been using data probably more deeply. This is just a guess here from my experience than a lot of other categories. Data is the new anything. It's like if you're in CPG, data is not new at all, right? You go back to the 80s, the 60s, whatever was market research, but then got more electronic. Again, I was at Nielsen at the 90s. And so, still a lot of folks were in other categories were just discovering it. Oh, look at this thing called data. And those folks were using it all the time. And I think if you learn it and coupled with that, there's only so much you can transform those businesses because they're so tangible. Right? You're never going to digitize a soda. It's still got to go through all these multi tiers of distribution and manufacturing and I love that category. And I feel like if you know that category, there's a lot of experience in there that's extensible to other categories that on a relative basis are much, if not simpler, at least a little more straightforward. But go in the back of a supermarket. Is there a more complicated B2B space than the back room of a supermarket with so many parties and so much stuff and so many turns and so many interactions and just, some stuff's got to be cold and frozen and stuff. It's just the most complicated environment. And it's really fascinating to just watch that world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, but you'd be surprised, even though it's very physical, there's a lot of digitization happening even in that space. You have micro fulfillment centers in the back of a Walmart, right? And
they've found right.
Last mile delivery, ghost kitchens, digitizing the supply chain, right? I did that in one of my previous roles. So there's a lot of data opportunities.
Spectacular data. No, and data can make a difference. It made a difference in so many places.
Right.
And I was at a recent conference where the head of IT at UPS spoke, and he talked about this network of the future as kind of the brand name of their current phase of transformation. And he showed all these digital twins, and they've got a whole digital twin of all the sorting area. But the underlying kind of feeling, and I felt it in the audience almost, it was palpable, was just the scope of his business.
Yeah.
Just the 100-something countries, 20 million packages. They don't know what size they are. They don't know where they're going. All the drivers, just the enormity of that was just so tangible. And this, we weren't talking about some person doing a POC in a little skunk works somewhere. This
Right.
was, massive activity on a scale
Right.
that most of these other folks won't even imagine.
Wow.
And it was really exhilarating to hear him talk about just very hardcore, absolute practical use of AI, of
Right.
digitization, of, data foundation and all that piece. It was really fun.
That's amazing.
In a geeky way, I mean, we love that stuff, right? You and I love
We
this,
do.
love to hear people tell those stories. So, and he was a great storyteller. It was nice to
Right.
hear.
Hey, Scott, a lot of fun talking to you. Before we wrap up, is there one piece of advice that you would like to share with data leaders who are maybe currently navigating the complexities of data management?
It's a question I get a lot, so I'm ready with my answer here for sure. It is get better at storytelling.
There you go.
Surprise, surprise. Big spoiler alert there. It can, forward your career. It's a superpower. If you can harness it, it can take people magically from a room full of people who have no idea what you're talking about to a room full of people who are chomping at the bit of like, how do we live without this?
Right.
And that comes from the story.
Yeah.
And so and everybody's a natural storyteller. Everybody knows how to tell a story. Don't tell me you don't know how. You talk to your kids about what you're doing that weekend. You talk to your parents about, what happened yesterday. You can all, but put it in a business framework and get training, go to Toastmasters, whatever it takes. Just do something to get better at that skill and you will see remarkable results.
Nice. No, I love it. And yeah, it's very important. What we've been talking about, and Scott, I have to check out your book, and I think you have a lot to share in this space. So it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Bytes of Brilliance. Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with our listeners. And
thanks for having me, Carson. It was great to be here.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you for coming. To our audience, don't forget to check out Scott's book, Telling Your Data Story. It's a fantastic resource for anyone looking to unlock the true potential of their data. Thank you for tuning in to Bytes of Brilliance. Until next time, keep on innovating and, of course, telling your data story.
Turn it up, it's your new groove, yeah. Riding waves in the digital blue, yeah. CDO time's got that insight, yeah. For the execs in the tech light, yeah. Bridging gaps with every tune, play it. Sync your mind to the tech boom, slay it.